Good morning, guys. I wanted to show you what the front garden looks like this year. The garden that I just rototilled with a little rototiller instead of a tractor, and that I did not deep mulch. I left the mulch from the year before and I only rototilled little teeny tiny strips to plant into. So let's go see how it looks. What puppy? This is what it looks like from the outside. It actually has very tall greenery, and then there's the little rabbit grazer, and there's the sheep. This is the other half of the garden. Because of the amount of work it is to use a rototiller, half the garden didn't even get planted. I just never got to it. On average, it probably took me 2 hours to rototill each of the little strips that I did. So it was very labor intensive. So what happened this year is because we didn't till, we couldn't get our sunk beds deep enough to hold water. This is our corn. Last year we had 4 rows of corn and they were producing by now. We'll get potatoes, because potatoes, they're deep enough that they can hold on to the moisture that we give them. Because I dug my deep sunken bed and then we took a shovel and buried them even deeper than that inside the trench, and so they'll be fine. We have beets and Swiss chard that are pretty resilient, but they're not going to get big like they were last year. Alright, so you can see this is bindweed. It's climbed right up the fence. On the side that I have sheep, it's not happening because the sheep eat it. On this side what I have is geese, and geese love grass. They love short grass, and so they can just live on short grass and not receive any supplemental food from me. But once it gets this tall or taller, they can't eat it anymore, and they're not going to eat bindweed. So that's the spot where I took the carpet up and just weed whacked. This is the spot where I left the carpet in place. And the problem is that the weeds grow out the sides of the carpet. This one is potatoes. We have weeded and we have watered, and yet we've got lots of pigweed that has come back up. The nice thing is that pigs like to eat pigweed, so it's not a big deal that it has pigweed for us, because we come out and pull more of it, give it to the pigs are happy. The Swiss chard is here, and we haven't finished eating the Swiss chard that is in the little beds in the backyard, in the hot beds, and so we haven't started on this one. Again, we can feed it to animals. This one is the sugar beets, and I could come out and cut sugar beet greens so that the beets themselves could get bigger. I think this is my best row, this one, but it's the one I was most careful with also, as far as getting the sunk bed deep enough. This one is potatoes. It's doing fine. And then we hit the corn. Corn in our area is difficult because it needs a long warm season. This year I did not plant my corn as early as I usually do. I waited until the frost-free advisory date, which is May 15th. Usually I plant it 2 weeks earlier than that, and it gets a head start. It does mean that I have to come out and pour water on it after a frost. It should be up to like my shoulders or taller by now, and it should be fully tall at this point. So it's really only good for fodder for the animals. And then we've got these peas. I planted these peas on the normal planting date here in Idaho, which is May 15th. Usually I plant them a lot earlier than that. But this year I thought I would just go traditional. I'd use the rototiller, and I'd plant when I'm supposed to plant instead of when I usually plant. And so they're not doing well. They're not enjoying the heat. They're like a spinach. They really enjoy cool weather. And so I have again just been pulling up the vines and feeding them to the rabbits. So those are my 2 big weeds here in the garden. The bindweed is the big one if I have lots of water in a spot, or if there's something to climb on. I can feed the rabbits and the pigs both, all of those weeds. Nothing in here is toxic to the animals except the potatoes. Hi sheep, you're such good little weeders. I so appreciate your work. Yes, I do. And you can see really the only thing that they haven't kept down really well is maybe the comfrey. Maybe the comfrey, because you don't super love comfrey because it's kind of spiky. Really short, and I didn't use any of my normal tricks in this garden. I didn't plant super early, and I didn't till with a tractor, and I didn't put down deep mulch. I didn't do any of my tricks on this one. I did a conventional Idaho garden, except without the herbicides. So, verdict. My recommendation if you want to be able to feed your family is do some hotbeds, because you can start them really early in the year and they can go really late in the year, and you can cover them and you can just manage your climate. And then do a row garden, but do a big row garden. This is a 5,000 square foot row garden. It's actually a little bigger than that, but the rows themselves are 50 feet. And then the whole thing, if you count the whole thing, which is my normal garden, it's 5,000 square feet. So it's half that, 2,500 square feet this year. I recommend that you do a tractor tilled garden, and that you deep mulch the paths, and that you have sunken beds. I'll show you here in this corn row. See that? Can you see that it's sunk? It's sunk, not raised. In our area, we have dry summers. We're in southeast Idaho, around Idaho Falls, so we have dry summers. And so instead of having raised beds where you're trying to keep the roots of the plants dry, you need sunk beds. And then you need to do deep watering once a week instead of shallow watering. And then it does great. Even this garden is great, with the exception of the corn and the peas. The peas are sad that it's so hot. The corn is sad that I didn't plant it a little bit earlier and that I didn't thin it out a little earlier. So I'll show this in comparison to my normal garden, and you guys can see the difference and why I'm saying what I'm saying. Guys, this is Paige teaching the turkeys how to catch grasshoppers. So she'll go catch a grasshopper and then she'll call the turkeys. But for right now, the turkeys are pretty good. They'll find and eat flies or ticks or ants, but their favorite is grasshoppers. So you can see our leaves are pretty clear. We've got a little bit of predation here. You can see the holes in the beets, but that's why we have the turkeys up here, is they will go through and look for the grasshoppers. I don't have the turkeys out here in the garden until things are knee-high. The reason for that is they will eat and disturb really young vegetation, but this stuff is harvesting size. So the vines already have fruit on them. The beets are already beets at the bottom. Oh, do you see that one? Oh, yep. Is he gonna go for it? Did he find it? Once we get all of them up here, it's pretty fun to watch.
We're just barely getting started, so.
Yeah, we've got 7 little turkeys. We've only got 3 of them up here. You get it?
Yep.
We got a treat. You want me to show the camera? Hold, no, you gotta hold still. You hold still. You hold still, let me move the camera. And now they think they get picked up.
There you go.
Yummy. Okay.
Yeah.
So it looks a little dry. We haven't been able to afford more sawdust. Sawdust here, if you can't get it free from tree companies, it costs $200 for me to get a big load. and I decided not to spend the money after I used up the last bit. So we've been mulching with weeds. We pull the weeds and lay them down, or I come with the weed whacker.
Got another one.
Got another one?
Half the size.
But just because I've got weeds in the path doesn't mean I've got a lot of weeds in the beds themselves. It doesn't mean we can't harvest from them. It just means we're not stressed out about it being picture perfect. The way that we have success in the beginning is that with anything that has a lot of space between it, like potatoes that haven't come up yet, I plant Swiss chard. And the Swiss chard doesn't bolt very easily. So what we do is as the potatoes get bigger, we come through and we harvest all the Swiss chard and we feed it to the rabbits, or we eat it ourselves. And that way it keeps the weeds from coming back up. Taking cuttings from the Swiss chard feeds us and feeds the rabbits, but it also makes more space for the potatoes. So all these rows had Swiss chard in them, but most of it's come out now. Morning guys, so we have a hard frost coming in on Tuesday. I think it's supposed to be 29 degrees. Okay, you drop them on the floor. Open up your bag.